Hi, I'm Patrick Jaguar with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. If you've not checked out my website, that address is thecosmicalchemist.com. You can book readings with me, Vedic astrology readings, rune readings, and I have a few videos on sale for download. Some instructional videos for Qigong. Qigong is a great mind-body practice that boosts and develops, increases physical health, emotional health, mental health, and deepens your spiritual connection. So anyway, in this video I want to talk about Beltane. Beltane is a very ancient holiday. It goes back into the old Celtic world, so we're talking about Ireland, Scotland, Isle of Man, England, before it was invaded by the Germanic people, by the Saxons, and then going into France, which was once called Gaul, even Spain, Portugal, and really even across Europe into the Middle East, because all of these places were populated by Indo-European people, aka Aryan. So don't want to get into all that in depth, that's a huge subject, but there was a common culture that spanned Eurasia basically at one point. So Beltane was common to people in all these areas. And, you know, Beltane being May 1st, a lot of people in America know about May Day. In communist countries, May Day was basically the anniversary of the World Socialist Revolution, the Communist Revolution. And May 1st also happens to be the birthday of the Illuminati, which was May 1st, 1776. Which was a secret society funded by bankers, which consequently funded and basically was the brain trust for revolutions all around the world. So American Revolution, French Revolution, and then eventually the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia that established the Soviet Union. And it's been going on and on ever since. There's a great book called Fire in the Minds of Men, written by Dr. James Billington, who was the Librarian of Congress at the Library of Congress for about 40 years. So, can't find any better credentials than that guy. In that book, he basically talked about how the revolutionary movements, the World Socialist Movement, communism, all came from Freemasonry. So this is why communism, socialism was using May 1st as May Day. So anyway, the point is this ancient holiday has come down to modern times, and it's influenced modern history, modern events. So let's talk about Beltane and its ancient roots. Beltane is named for the god Bel. So Bel, it's a name that meant Lord or Master. And this is really interesting. So even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there are different names for God that get thrown around, like Elohim, El Shaddai, Jehovah, the Lord. And really throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament, God looks totally schizophrenic. Because one minute, he's a nice guy, he's giving people blessings, and then the next minute he's telling people to go commit genocide in order to steal new land, and he's sending plagues and all kinds of crazy shit down. So people have a really hard time explaining the schizophrenia of God, like these two personalities. I think what you're dealing with two different gods. So you're dealing with Jehovah, who's like really a total sociopath, total psychopath. And then you have the Lord. So this Bel. And Jehovah is always trying to punish people for worshiping Bel. So Bel, or Baal, was the Lord, and he was basically a fertility god who sort of helped protect humans and protect cattle and protect crops and all that kind of stuff, and wanted people to have good worldly experiences and sensual experiences and prosper and be fruitful and do all that stuff. So, pretty interesting. And, you know, this god Baal or Bel, you know, in Ireland, it's like Baile. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but B-A-I-L-E, Baile. And you see a lot of Irish towns. There are hundreds of Irish towns that start with Baile. So like Ballyshannon, Ballybunion, you know, so on and so forth. So these towns were named for this god Baal or Baal or Bel. So this Beltane, so Baal's holiday, was a celebration of, basically a celebration of light, a festival of light. So it was categorized by bonfires in the middle of the night, and people would basically have a party. And in ancient times, the party often ended in kind of like a mass orgy. I don't think all communities did this, but you know, the memory of that has come down because the festival was all about fertility. So yeah, so Bel was a god of light, protector of humans, livestock, crops, like I said. It was a fire festival, and it celebrated the first day of summer. So this first week of May is the real first day of summer. So this is a festival of growth, spiritual renewing, love, fertility, healing, you know, really all the good things in life. And it encourages people to really find and to focus on your own inner light and getting it to shine more brightly. So it's basically to focus on the light of your soul, because the soul makes all things possible, manifests all things. So, and then, you know, the other thing too was it's all about encouraging the people to embrace the spirit worlds that are all around us in order to receive spiritual and energetic protection. So as I mentioned, this was the first day of summer. This is the real first day of summer because it's halfway between the Spring Equinox, which is mid-spring, and the Summer Solstice, which for hundreds and for thousands of years, Summer Solstice was called Midsummer's Day. Now, in modern times, the Summer Solstice is called the first day of summer. Well, the thing that doesn't compute about that is that's the longest day of the year. That's the most sunlight in a year. That's June 21st. By about the 24th of June, the days start shortening by a minute each day. So it doesn't make sense for summer to start at the maximum point of light, because after the solstice, the summer is on the decline, the light is on the decline. So in the old days, June 21st, the summer solstice, was Midsummer's Day. And the spring equinox, which is 90 days before, was the middle of the spring. So right between the spring equinox around March 21st and then the summer solstice, June 21st, you're about May 1st to May 7th. You're somewhere in there. You know, the Chinese recognize May 7th as the first day of spring, or like May 6th, but it's all in the neighborhood. So yeah, really the first day of summer is halfway between the equinox, where you get equal day and light, halfway between that and halfway between maximum light on the summer solstice. So around May 1st is when the summer is born. So that's the deal with that, in my opinion. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention too, you know, on Beltane you've got the bonfires, you know, the big celebration, the feast. And then too, you've got the ancient ritual of the maypole. So the maypole was a phallic symbol. It was symbolic of a penis, you know, an erect penis. And for fertility, you know, in any animal, whether it's human or cattle or chickens or sheep or pigs, whatever the hell, for fertility, to make new offspring, you need a healthy, erect penis that will transmit a good quantity of sperm so that a pregnancy can occur. So the maypole was it was this ritualistic penis, and basically the maidens, the young women in the community, would do a ritual dance around it. So this was a celebration of fertility. So fertility, and then the light of the sun, the fire of the sun, that helps vegetation to grow, because then the animals eat the vegetation and you get a prosperous harvest in the fall. All right, let me see here. Yeah, so this May 1st, it's what's called a cross quarter day. So the 4 quarters are the 2 solstices, summer and winter, and then the 2 equinoxes, spring and fall. So really the seasons start between these solstices and equinoxes. That's the old view. And then, I don't know, within the last 100 years, you know, the college boys and college girls who run Scientism, aka science, started saying that these equinoxes and solstices were the first days of the seasons. I don't buy that. I like the old way. People are more in touch with nature and the seasons. Alright, let me find my place again. Yeah, so another interesting thing about Beltane, it is the opposite and the complement day to Samhain. Or, you know, in phonetic English it's Samhain, but it's Samhain in Gaelic. Or something close to that. I don't speak Gaelic. So yeah, Samhain is October 31st. The Christians appropriated it and it became Halloween, and then November 1st became All Saints' Day. So this was, when you, in terms of agriculture, Samhain was New Year's Eve, because that was the last day of the harvest season. And then November 1st, you know, the land would lay fallow until spring. So Samhain was the day, you know, in the spirit of Halloween, it was the day when the veil between worlds, specifically between the human world and then the underworld or the world of the dead, was the thinnest, so that you could commune with the spirits of your ancestors, or just the spirits of the dead in general, whoever you wanted to speak to. So Samhain and Beltane are opposite each other. You know, so from like May 1st to November 1st, that is, you know, they're on opposite sides of the calendar. So now the difference with Beltane is that on Beltane the barriers between these worlds were thin, but it was a time where you could commune with the nature spirits, you know, the fairies, the elementals, all sorts of nature spirits that could help to incur good harvest, good growth of livestock, good reproduction among livestock, and then even good reproduction among humans, you know, so there could be new generations. So what people would do, you know, especially in the Gaelic world, so we're talking Ireland, Scotland, Isle of Man, people would leave offerings at the fairy forts. And basically fairy forts are these mounds in those countries where the nature spirits are said to inhabit. And you know, I know a lot of people in Ireland, and they all tell stories about how if you have a fairy fort on your property, you just don't mess with it, because really bad things can happen. They all have horror stories about farmers who try to bulldoze a fairy fort, and then in pretty short order they have some horrendous injury, like their tractor rolls over on top of them and they shatter a leg or break their neck, or, you know, they get killed. It's just something you don't mess with. It's kind of like in Iceland, how the country's littered with boulders, and if you want to do construction, you want to build a building, build a road, and there's a boulder, the law of the government of Iceland requires that you send out a certified geomancer to basically see if there are any nature spirits living in the boulder. And if they're in there, the geomancer has to ask, you know, can we move this boulder, or do you want it to stay where it is? So that's the law in Iceland, that you have to do this. So people outside the United States, where, you know, we live a pretty boring life, but people outside the United States know this shit is real, and they work with it and they respect it. So yeah, so Beltane was a big day for leaving offerings of food near these fairy forts. basically to gain the support of these nature spirits so that they could help to ensure, good crops, healthy livestock, healthy children, pregnancy, all that good stuff. Yeah, so, some interesting notes I made too. This god Baal or Baal or Bel, and then also called by Belanos, and a bunch of not abbreviations, variations on that spelling. This god was the bright one, the shining one, and and then Beltane too was the called the bright fire, the festival of bright fire. So yeah, this Bel or Baal or Baal was god of light, a god of healing. Like I said, called the bright one, the shining one. He was also called the gray one. That's a pretty esoteric reference, and you see this even in medieval art too, where the color gray will symbolize secret fire. So secret fire can mean different things. It can be a reference to Kundalini. It can be a kind of a reference to the fire of the soul. You can't see it, and it hides, but it's there. Gray is basically like a hidden color. Like when you talk about a gray man, like a gray man is somebody who can blend into his surroundings and kind of hide and not be seen. So yeah, this god Baal was very similar to Apollo as a god of light and healing, and he was associated with the horse and the wheel. So to me, it's a connection to the Scythians, aka Indo-Europeans, aka Aryans. This wave of migrants that entered Europe, and in some other places in the world too, like India, during the age of Aries, around 4,000 years ago. I think they made it to Egypt. They brought the horse and the chariot to Egypt, and even into Mesopotamia, like Sumer. What else did I want to talk about here? Oh yeah, and then the other thing I want to talk about too was Walpurgisnacht. So Walpurgisnacht is called it's the eve of Beltane. And Walpurgisnacht was basically a Christian appropriation. So this Beltane was celebrated all through Europe. It's not just the British Isles, but France, Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, even into Eastern Europe, into Italy, the former Yugoslavia, all those countries like Croatia, Serbia, Slovenia, Slovakia, you name it. So it was a widely celebrated holiday. The church couldn't get rid of it. So what they did, like all of our holidays, like Christmas, Easter, so on and so forth, Halloween, what they did was they took that holiday and changed it a little bit and gave it their own name. And named it after a saint. And so the saints are basically just restylings of patron gods and goddesses. So in the Christian world there are patron saints, just a new face for the patron gods and goddesses. So yeah, so this was it was a Christian corruption and appropriation, and Walpurgisnacht is still acknowledged by the major branches of Christianity, like the Catholic Church, Church of England, a few others too. And I think sort of like the New World churches, like we have in America, they restyled themselves and tried to look a lot, cleaner and less corrupt than, the older branches of Christianity. So their kind of marketing gimmick was like, oh, we threw out all those holidays and all you need is the Bible. You don't need the seasons or the holidays or any of that stuff. So yeah, it's not so much like the more newfangled branches of Christianity, but more the older ones still acknowledge Walpurgisnacht. So Walpurgisnacht was named for Saint Walpurga, And you know, in the history books, the storybooks, she was hailed by Christians in Germany for battling pests, rabies, whooping cough, and witchcraft. And witchcraft being not heathenry or devil worship, but heresy. So heresy is incorrectly practiced Christianity. So that's a concept to chew on. Witchers were not accused of being devil worshippers, they were just accused of being heretics. So, inaccurate Christians. So yeah, Walpurgisnacht, celebrated by Christians, it's marked by bonfires. It's this festival of lights. And it's just like Beltane. And it's celebrated on April 30th rather than May 1st, so they kind of changed it a little bit. And, you know, it's interesting, in 2022, this year, yesterday, I'm making this video on May 1st, right on Beltane, we had, in my opinion, a very intense solar eclipse. And it was visible in, you know, far southern hemisphere, so we're talking southern South America, you know, like the farthest south regions of Chile and Argentina, and then part of Antarctica, close to South America. So, you know, this was an eclipse that really stirred a lot of like root chakra issues, you know, kind of like security, material security, you know, type issues. So to me, this marks 2022 as a very transformative year. And since Beltane is this festival of light, to me this says that 2022 is a year when the light is going to start returning. So we definitely need this, because in the last 2 years, the corporate technocratic psychopaths who run the medical system and you know, the drug industry and all that fun stuff, and the banks tried to make a big push to take our freedom once and for all, and they're trying more and more to basically like erase our culture, erase our history. But you get a solar eclipse on Walpurgisnacht on the eve of Beltane. That's a huge indicator that the light is returning. So take some heart and some encouragement and some courage in that. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is, and this is pretty interesting. So it's May 1st, the May 1st time frame through history. So, you know, because secret societies for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, have been recruiting grounds for what we call the deep state. Because of this, these sacred holy days are used in order to help people to achieve their goals, to help powerful people who understand things like the cycles of nature, the cycles of the planets and stars, psychology, brain anatomy, human nature. It's used by powerful people who understand us and our natural environment better than we do, to basically feed their goals with energy and to help them pull off the changes that they're seeking to pull off. So a lot of big announcements are made on May 1st through history. A lot of big events happen. So, you know, the big one, May 1st, 1776, the day the Illuminati was founded. If you don't think the Illuminati is real, go to the website of the Library of Congress, search for a letter, or 2 letters between President George Washington and then the Reverend George Washington Snyder. And that was in 1799, right? Shortly before George Washington died. And in George Washington's own letter, he says, "Nobody is more convinced than I am of the existence of the Illuminati." So, yeah, it's a thing. So yeah, May 1st, 1776, founding of the Illuminati, who started all the world revolutionary movements, the world socialist movement, the world communist movement. And, you know, the people who are still pushing these just really crazy left-wing agendas to destroy all forms of boundaries and barriers in our world. So like national borders, genders, cultures, ethnicities, family, just on and on and on. History, free thinking, and then the immune system, as we've seen in the last 2 years with the scamdemic and the experimental shots. So, you know, they're still at it. And they're going to lose. I think they're pretty fucked at this point. They had to move too quick, too fast in the last couple of years. But they're making a giant mess, and it'd be nice if they would just get the fuck out of here. So we got that May 1st, May 1st, 1776. 2019, Naruhito becomes the Emperor of Japan. So Japan announced and coronated their new emperor. Really good day to rise to a royal throne, because it's the festival of light, the festival of the sacred fire. And then 2018, the Syrian Democratic Forces launched a campaign in the Syrian civil war to clear ISIS out of Syria. And they kicked their asses pretty nicely. And, ISIS was being run by this, what we would call deep state or Illuminati, these mega banker technocrats trying to steal Syria. 2011, Pope John Paul was beatified by Pope Benedict the 16th, his successor. So Pope John Paul, the old pope who died, 6-7 years before that, he was declared a saint by his successor, Pope Benedict. So basically the Catholic Church cooked up 3 miracles that John Paul supposedly worked so that he could become a saint. And then the next day in 2011, on May 2nd, the whole Bin Laden raid, which was, totally bogus and a really lame story, took place, in Pakistan, where supposedly a bunch of operators, some SEAL Team 6, raided a compound in Islamabad, Pakistan, headquarters of the Pakistani military and the intelligence services, where Bin Laden had supposedly been hiding for years. Carried out that raid, shot him, grabbed his body, and flew away in their helicopters. And then within a matter of weeks, most of those SEALs were dead. So like a total dead men tell no tales kind of a job. But just a really lame story around it. I think Bin Laden had been dead for about 10 years, since like December 2001 by the time that took place. Something happened at that compound in Pakistan, but I don't think it was Bin Laden. Now, an interesting parallel to that, if you jump back to 1945, news that Adolf Hitler had committed suicide was announced on May 1st, 1945. But in Moscow, I forget the museum it's in, but they had what was called a piece of Hitler's skull, because the Soviets were the first into Berlin. They had what was called a piece of Hitler's skull. And within the last 10 or 15 years, that skull was genetically tested. And it's actually a piece of a woman's skull, so it wasn't even Hitler. I think Hitler probably survived, but that news was announced in order to open a new chapter for the history of the world and sort of start a new era, which was the Cold War. All right. 2004, on May 1st, it was announced Cyprus, Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, and Slovenia, quote-unquote, joined the European Union, which is a corporate communist banking empire. It's basically the European Central Bank, which is a private bank, gets to steal the national wealth and rope these countries in and control their economies. So, yeah, European Union is definitely an outgrowth of this Illuminati born on May 1st, 1776. 2003, George W. Bush landed on the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln off the coast of California and gave his mission accomplished speech after the invasion of Iraq and declared victory, even though it turned out to be a huge debacle. Jumping back to 1970, the U.S. military began taking part in the Cambodian campaign, so joining up with the South Vietnamese military in invading Cambodia to, fight communist guerrillas, which accomplished nothing. Communists took Cambodia over anyway. 1961, Fidel Castro, the Justin Trudeau baby daddy, he looks like him anyway. Fidel Castro proclaims Cuba a socialist nation and abolishes elections. Yeah, it's pretty progressive. That's what happens when socialist governments take your country over. They abolish elections. They make themselves look really cute and caring, Care Bears. But once they get all the power, they abolish elections. So, yeah, that's when Castro really consolidated his power. He, they started fighting in the late 50s, and then on New Year's Eve in 1959, Batista announced that he was abdicating and Castro took over, and then by May 1st, 1961, Castro consolidated power. 1960, that was the U-2 incident. So CIA pilot Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union. So he was flying this U-2 spy plane for Central Intelligence Agency, flying at 70,000 feet, and they believed it was higher than any Soviet missile could reach. And I didn't see this thing take place, but apparently they were wrong, and he was shot down over the Soviet Union. He ejected and parachuted and was captured and then returned, but it was a huge diplomatic incident. And I guess a good May Day celebration for the Soviets. 1956, the polio vaccine was officially made available to the public. Vaccines. 1945, I mentioned Hitler's death announced, Hitler's alleged death, which DNA science would beg to differ with. 1931, the Empire State Building was dedicated. So, and this was, it was dedication of a building, but, the deeper meaning, it was really establishing the global financial empire in New York. And that building was a symbol of it. But it was going to take the coming war to really make that empire a reality. With the Bretton Woods Agreement and making the U.S. dollar the supreme currency and all that, all that fun stuff. 1930, the name Pluto was proposed for the newly discovered dwarf planet at the far reaches of the solar system. 1915, the Lusitania departed the harbor in New York City. And then it was sunk May 7th off the coast of Ireland. So, May 1st to May 7th, basically all cultures in the world agreed that that was the start of summer. So, it may not have been, well, no, it was intentional at the time because, so Lusitania was a British ship, and it was traveling between America and England, and but Americans are traveling on it. And what was going on was in 1915, America was neutral in World War I, but American firms, arms manufacturers, were still selling weapons to the British, even though they were neutral. They really weren't supposed to, according to the laws of war. So the Germans found out about this, and they put out ads in the New York Times announcing to Americans, don't travel on these British ships. If you do, you will be at risk of, your life will be at risk because we're going to sink these British passenger liners because they're carrying weapons that America's not supposed to be selling. So Americans boarded the Lusitania regardless, and the ship was sunk. Some of them died, and then 2 years later, when Woodrow Wilson and his handlers and his underlings were trying to scam America into entering the war onto the side of Great Britain, they said the battle cry was "Remember the Lusitania." So I think it was pretty deliberate. They were basically setting up a sacrifice here that could be used to leverage public sentiment. 1898, the Battle of Manila Bay. So this opened the door for Philippines to become an American colony. So the Battle of Manila Bay was when the American Asiatic fleet, I think it sailed out of San Francisco. I don't know, maybe Pearl Harbor, I can't remember. But the American Asiatic fleet sailed over to Philippines and decimated the Spanish Navy over there, destroyed all its ships, and it was a real shit stomp. It was no contest. So the Philippines then belonged to the deep state of America, the corporations that were controlling America. We're going to jump back. 1707. The Act of Union was announced. So this was the joining of England and Scotland to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. So basically, Scotland was basically tricked into joining England through some legal games, some legal magic. Basically, James Stewart, king of both England and Scotland, was sort of tricked into giving up the sovereignty and the freedom of Scotland. Jumping back, 1486, Columbus presented his plans to the Spanish Queen Isabel I of Castile to establish this western trade route to the Indies. And mainstream history says, oh, Columbus had no idea America was between Europe and Asia. And it's like, yeah, my ass, because the Irish, the Vikings, the Portuguese, all kinds of people, the Basques have been sailing to America for centuries. They knew exactly it was there. Columbus's father-in-law was a Templar who gave him maps. Was a Portuguese Templar who gave him maps of America. 1328, the Wars of Scottish Independence ended. So basically Scotland won its independence from England for a little while, almost 400 years. And then the last one, 1169, Norman invasion of Ireland. So Norman mercenaries, being retained by the King of England, invaded Ireland. They invaded Leinster, which is the eastern province where Dublin is. And the goal was to conquer and take over Ireland, but these Normans actually ended up being absorbed into Irish culture. So this is where you get last names that begins with Fitz. So like Fitzgerald, Fitzmaurice, Fitzpatrick. Yeah, those are Norman names. And this whole Norman invasion of Ireland, this was the Vatican's effort to either destroy or at least drive the Celtic Church underground. So the Celtic Church was run by the Druids for thousands of years, and it was this is where the stories of the Bible were actually written, by the Celtic Church in Ireland, and they were not considered to be literal historical facts by the Celtic Church. They were actually written as allegories and symbols and myths. And but these stories were hijacked by the Vatican, and the whole thing was made to look like a bunch of Jewish books. but not the case. You know, the Druids were in Europe and in the Middle East, so even the so-called ancient Israelites, who were really Phoenician Canaanites, they had Druids too. And those Druids became corrupted. They're the ones who were sacrificing children to Molech, and you know, that's why the Bible says that the Babylonian captivity happened, because they got totally corrupt. So yeah, 1169, the Vatican said we need to squash this Celtic church. You know, the Celtic church had a druid that was sort of the leader of it, but it had no centralized authority. It was basically a confederation. It wasn't, you know, a pyramidal top-down hierarchy. So, and they also, the Celtic church celebrated all of these sacred days, and, you know, like Beltane. And they even acknowledged different gods and goddesses. They didn't consider it a threat to the, you know, the one unseen god behind, you know, all the other gods and goddesses, and, you know, behind really the, you know, the veil of the universe. So anyway, I've been going on and on. Thanks for tuning in, and check out my website, thecosmicalchemist.com. If you've not received a reading from me, I highly recommend it. I do Vedic astrology readings and rune readings, and these are great ways to map out your mind, understand yourself better, and to take some of the mystery out of your life. And yeah, and if you have not subscribed to my channel and liked and shared and commented on these videos, please consider doing so. It helps the channel, and I appreciate it. So have a good one, and talk to you later. Take it easy.